experiences as a World War II navigator aboard a B-17 bomber. That's a long title, but it also introduces a subject that I think is going to be very exciting for all of us to hear about this afternoon. Vincent was a student of history, and in particular of World War II, so it goes without saying he would have been very interested in this presentation. We're very excited to have Alfred Benjamin, who was lead navigator for a fleet of B-17 bombers for numerous missions in Europe during World War II, with us this afternoon. And I want to extend a personal thank you as well to his wife, Lorraine, for traveling down from Cape Cod. Both of them came down yesterday for this presentation, and for thanking them for volunteering their time to be here in support of the library and the Vincent Barbarisi Fund. And of course, a thank you to the audience for being here as well, enabling libraries to do what they are intended to do, which is to be a resource for our community. My son Daniel is going to lead off the program, and I would ask us to start off by giving a welcome to Alfred.
There are many stories that have been told by the World War II generation, but those stories are disappearing. And so it's really with great pleasure that we're able to have Alfred here, because he, lived through a time that so many of us have only seen in pictures and a little bit of camera footage from back then, but he has an amazing ability to bring it to life. Alfred flew 31, maybe 32, we'll get to that later, missions over Germany in various B-17 models, the E, F, and G, E in training and F and G in combat, from July 1944 until January 1945. He served as lead navigator, as my mother mentioned, for anywhere from dozens to hundreds to even close to 1,000, I believe, planes on various bombing missions for the 8th Air Force. He was with the 384th Bomb Group, the 544th Squadron, based out of Grafton Underwood in East Anglia, obviously in England. And he has some truly amazing stories. But what I think is also even amazing is what a fascinating person he is. I, in fact, have tapped into this gene pool to some extent, because I just married his granddaughter a week ago, which is maybe the reason we were able to score this phenomenal speaker to come here. So thank you for that. But more interestingly, his stories are fascinating, and so I would love to lead into them. So Alfred, to start out, you told us from a young age you were really interested in aviation, but what spurred that, and how did you kind of build on that interest from such a young age?
Well, I was born in 1924, and in 1928, Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic Ocean. And every time I looked up, because of the publicity that Lindbergh got, is it on? Yeah. I said, there's Lindy. And this engendered something to me about aviation, and I was involved in aviation all my life. Aviation was my desire and my interest and my research. I read every book that I could find on aviation, and as I grew older, of course, the war started in 1941. I was 17 at that point, and I became 18. And at the point of 18, I could not go into the Air Corps because of the fact that in order to be an officer in the Air Corps at that time, you had to have a 2-year college education. I was just out of high school. But because of the fact that the war was proceeding, they decided that if you could pass the equivalency exam, you could go in and become an officer in the Air Corps. Now, I passed the exam. It's the only exam in my whole life I ever aced. And I went in. Now, they really didn't expect that a guy of 18 was going to be able to do this. So I ended up as, I think, the 3rd or 4th youngest commissioned officer in the service, because of the fact that I did it at the point where I could do it early. Becoming a cadet was a difficult thing. First of all, when they opened the floodgates for all these people who could take this exam, we had hundreds and hundreds of people who became involved and in the Reserve Corps. And at one point in time, we had so many people in the Reserve Corps that the regular Army, we were in the Army, of course, the regular Army said, if you don't get these people into action somehow, we're going to take them into the infantry. So what the Air Corps did is they hooked up with all of the colleges in America, and they started a college course called a college training detachment for future officers. And so I went to a college training detachment in Buffalo, Canisius College. Canisius was a Catholic college, and they had brothers who were teaching there. And I don't think I learned much about navigation there, but I did learn about the Catholic religion. Well, anyway, after I graduated that course, I was very lucky. When we went there, they classified us into freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors. And I was a bright kid, and I was in the senior class, although I had just as I say, I was just out of high school. And the senior class is the one that they sent into service first. They sent us down for classification. And of course, I wanted to be a pilot. Everybody wanted to be a pilot. But because of the fact that when I knew the war was coming when I was a kid, about 17 or 16, I went and I bought in Boston, I went to the Old Corner bookstore, and I bought the navigation book that the Army published. And here it is, right here. This book here gave me the leg up to be able to get into the service and to be what I eventually became. Now, because I passed the exam as a navigator and a bombardier and a pilot, and I wanted to go to pilot training school, they sent me to pilot training school. I had about 26 hours in pilot training school, and they came to me and they said, "You were so high with your navigation scores, and we need navigators, so we're going to take you out of this program and put you into the navigation program." So I ended up as a navigator rather than a pilot. However, they did teach me how to fly. And eventually I got a license, and I had a private pilot license, and I enjoyed flying a little bit. But my main course in the service, of course, was as a navigator. Navigation was really, to me, because of the book, was really something that was very, very easy. And because it was easy, I had no problem at all. The only problem I did have is that we had, at that time, it was like West Point, and they had classifications. The senior class could bully the classes under them. And I had a terrible time because I'm a type A personality. And when somebody tells me to do something, sometimes I don't want to do it. My wife will attest to that. Excuse me. Anyway, after I got out of that and got commissioned as a second lieutenant, I was sent to a training school to get familiar with the B-17. And this was about 3.5 or 4 months of familiarization with the B-17, where we flew all over the western part of the United States. Eventually, we were set up to go overseas. We went from where I was, we picked up an airplane in Kearney, Nebraska, and we flew that to Dowfield in Bangor, Maine. And we were supposed to take that overseas. Now, you have to understand that I was 18 at the time, or no, maybe I was 19, and they were going to entrust me to navigate a plane across the ocean. Now, if you look at it today, I don't think anybody would be able to do that, but at that time, there it was. So we went and we left from Dowfield. We landed in Gander, Newfoundland, which was an easy flight because we could see the ground, we could see the sky. It was just an easy flight. And we took off from Gander going to Reykjavik, Iceland. Now the thing got a little bit hairy. We couldn't see the ground, we couldn't see the sky. We were in between 2 layers of clouds. And the only navigation I could do was dead reckoning navigation. I had no information. They wouldn't allow us to use our radio navigation system, which is the only thing we had. We didn't have anything like these little boxes we have today, you know. I would have given my soul for one of those. Anyway, as we took off from Gander, I got a call from the top turret gunner. He said, "You know, are you sure we're going right?" He says, "Because the plane is going to the right over there." Because we all took off at the same time. And I said, "No, we're okay, don't worry about it." And then a minute later, I got one from the left gunner. He said, "Hey, there's a guy going way over to the left." I said, "Don't worry about it, the law of averages says I'm right." Well, as it turned out, my navigation was impeccable because about 4 hours into the mission, I called up to the pilot and I said, "You can let down through the clouds now and you'll find the airport directly ahead.
He said, I don't believe you. He said, well, I said, let's go and see if we can do it. And he did. He looked down through the clouds, and it was directly ahead. It was only luck, believe me. You know, navigation was an art and not a science. We were over the ocean. We had no navigational aids, and all I had was a compass and a head. And we were lucky. We made it that way. As it turned out, we were socked in Reykjavik for 11 days. We came in probably the first ones, so they put us at the head of the line, and the boys came in behind us. They put us behind, and then we had a great big line of airplanes. And then when the weather broke and we could get out, they turned all the airplanes around, and the last one in was the first one out. So we, at that point, we finally got out, but there were so many planes in the air. When we got over to England, they had no place to put us. And we were going around looking for an airbase for them to put us. And they finally put us into a little fighter aircraft, an RAF fighter base. And the RAF fighter base had a 3,000-foot runway. And we just about got it in, and I never saw that airplane again. We never took it out. They took us out by bus, and I think they must have taken the plane apart and transported it by truck because they couldn't get it out of that field. But that was only one of the things that happened. Later on, we went through a phase training in England, learning to be familiar with the English countryside, which is different than the American countryside. I don't know if you've ever seen England, but it's all these little patches of green all over the place, little teeny farms, patches of green, and we had to get familiar with how it worked. Excuse me. As you can see, I'm not the one who can talk this long without coughing. Hold on a minute.
Well, Alfred, actually, that might actually be a good place to interject a little bit while you grab a drink of water here. But one thing I'd really like to know about is the guys in your crew. Did you train with that same group who then flew over with you to England? And were you with largely that same group for your entire career?
Yeah, we trained with the group. We trained with the group here in the States. We were in Sioux City, Iowa. That was the air base, and we joined our crew there. I was the last member in the crew. I was the navigator, but the crew was all formed at that particular time. They were waiting for me to come, and I joined the crew, and we did the phase training there in Sioux City. And then, as I say, we picked up a plane and flew across the ocean from that point. I mean, you have to give credit to the Air Corps for allowing these kids to do this. I mean, as I look at it today, I mean, it was sort of foolish to give me navigation to send me across the ocean. I had never been over the ocean before. I had never been on a trip that was so long. But listen, it happened. Okay.
Well, to underscore that, I mean, I remember when I heard you telling this story once before, you talked about the planes that went to the right and the planes that went to the left. Did all those planes actually make it to England?
Only two made it to England, myself and the one who went to the right. The one to the left was lost. This happens once in a while, I mean, but that happened in that particular trip. I have to tell you a little bit about my first mission in England. When we finally got to it, our first mission was with a pilot who was coming up to 25 missions, and he was going to go home. This was his last mission, and he was taking us out on the first mission. My pilot had been with him one trip before, and then we went out with him as the commander and my pilot as the co-pilot, and we bombed a little airfield north of Paris. Our oxygen was hit at about 30,000 feet. When your oxygen is hit at 30,000 feet, we had no oxygen. And the senior pilot who knew what to do, he put the nose down and he dove down to 10,000 feet. And when we got to 10,000 feet, he called on the intercom and said, "Get me home." Now, this is my first trip, and all of a sudden I'm in the middle of France. And I don't know, and I'm scared. I mean, the flak was all over the place, and I had never seen it before. And he said, "Get me home." So the only thing I could think of was, "Go west, young man." So I said 270 degrees. He went to 270 degrees, And after a while, I found where I was, and I finally got us home easily. But when it happened, I really didn't know where I was at the time, because I could just see us diving down to get to 10 or 11,000 feet. And it was an interesting guy. When we got on the ground, he said, he said, I've got to give you credit. He says, I never had a navigator who knew where we were so quick.
So you mentioned actually being, scared, as I think we all would be on those first, times up in the air. Did that dissipate as you went up every time, or was it as scary every time when the flak was bursting around?
I don't think I ever was not scared. I mean, you go up there, and I was very lucky. I was later in the war. The Luftwaffe was really pretty well beaten by the time I got there. In the beginning, we were losing about 3% a mission, which meant that you did 30 missions or 25 missions, and it was 4% a mission. You went 25 missions, and they sent you home. And as I was there, it was 30 missions when I got there, and 35 missions when I left, because you were technically dead. That's when they sent you home. It was 3. It was a tough thing, and when you went into a target, first of all, if you were leading the target, you had a break, because the guns hadn't really got a chance to get your altitude and get your position and what you're doing. They don't know which target you're trying to hit, and they don't know why you're trying to hit this particular target, and their guns are not really set on you. So if you're leading the target, you have a little bit of a break. But if you're 4th or 5th or 6th group in the target, they've already got your altitude, they know where you're coming, they know what you're doing, and it is just horrendous. All you see as you look in front of it, it looks like you're looking through a screen, a fly screen in the window. Every little cross is a piece of flak that's been fired up at you, and you don't know if they're going to get you or not. As high as we could go, they could shoot higher, and they were always on our altitude, and it was it was scary. Also, they had a few tactics. They said if we shoot up a pink burst, that means that the fighters are going to come in. We'll stop shooting, and the fighters will come in. And we were more afraid of the fighters than we were of the flak, but maybe we were more afraid of the flak than the fighters. I can't remember which. Either way, it was not a happy circumstance, let me tell you. The combat was tough. If you ever want to know what the 8th Air Force went through, there's one movie that you could do. It's 12 O'Clock High, the original movie. And 12 O'Clock High, the original movie, really tells it the way it was. They sent us out on missions that we could not complete successfully, just to be able to get the Luftwaffe to come up and try to knock us down, so we could thin out the Luftwaffe fighters. And we lost a lot of people, lost a lot of men, and did that. We went on one mission to Peenemünde, and Peenemünde was where they were making the V2 rockets. And this was beyond our gas supply. We went up and knew we wouldn't be able to come back to our base. And it was a tough mission. We was way up over the Skagerrak, and we turned around and we came back, and they landed everywhere. We landed in Scotland, we landed in the north areas of England. It was really a tough mission, and those that got back. A lot of people went to Sweden, but because they didn't think they could get back to our place. So, yeah.
Now, you mentioned how ferocious the combat was. Now, did you have fighter escorts for most of these, or could they only go part of the way?
In the beginning, we had fighter escorts, I would say 300 miles into the enemy. In the end, we had fighter escorts 600 or 700 miles in. But fighters had a minimum amount of gasoline, and they also had these wing tanks that they put on the planes. So if they were just cruising along looking for the Luftwaffe, and they saw us there, they would try to protect us. But if they ever saw a Luftwaffe plane, they would drop their wing tanks, and therefore they only had a few minutes of combat, and then they had to go home. So if they were in combat, we had very little protection. The only time we had protection is if they didn't find anybody to shoot at. Very simple. Now, we went out on my first 12 missions, I would say. We came home with less than 4 engines. each time we were damaged in some way. And basically what happened in the first mission, they got our oxygen, as I said, and from then on, the shrapnel would break oil lines in our engine. And when the oil lines go, the first thing you have to do is feather the propeller. When you feather the propeller, you're turning the propeller so it's facing the wind and it's not going round and round. And that way you can still fly. If you cannot feather your propeller and it's being forced by the wind to go around, it'll rattle the wing right off. So the moment we're hit and the moment the oil pressure starts to drop, they have to feather the prop. And the first 12 missions, that's what happened to us. We got oil lines hit continuously, and we had to drop out of formation and come back. I thought I was a bad luck guy. I really did. Every time we went out, we were coming back with alone. And when you come back alone, the fighters, mostly P-47s, we had mostly P-47s who were fighter escort, and we were coming back alone. What they would do is they would tuck themselves under our wing and follow along with us as long as they had gasoline, hoping that somebody would come to try to jump us. Because if somebody came to try to jump us, they would jump them. And it was really something that they could protect us. And we called them Little Friend. And the little friend, you wave to the pilot, he would wave back to you, and he would be underneath you. And this is in the middle of a war, of course.
Now, you mentioned those first 12 missions, you made it back okay. What happened on the 13th
Well,
mission?
the 13th mission, I didn't make it back. That's the mission that I really was shot down on. Now, I wrote at the time in England, I wrote a history of this particular mission. And it was handwritten on a piece of yellow paper. And I took that home with me. And at one point in time, my wife and I retyped it onto regular paper. And when I knew I was going to speak here, I went and found it. And it was in such bad shape that we had to retype it again. But I have it here, and what I'm going to do later on, I'm going to read the thing from you. Now, this is as close to the real mission that I could get. There are other stories about this particular mission that don't quite coincide with the memory that I have, but I have this that I wrote in England at the time, and I'm sure that my version of it is the most correct version that there is. See, my pilot gave a version of it, and he gave an entirely different version of why we jumped. And my version of why we jumped was because we had to jump.
Would you like to read it now?
Well, I could read that, but I don't think I'll read that now, but wait a minute.
Oh, I would love to read it, sure. That would be great.
Okay, I'll let Dan read it.
Yeah, sure.
It'll save me.
Yeah, we'll let you recover a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't have quite the gravitas that you do with the voice, but I'll see what I can do. All right. This is entitled The Lucky 13th. The day started as 12 other days that had gone before, pre-dawn in the English Midlands. The duty sergeant entered our barracks room to awaken us for our 13th mission. We pushed the fatigue from our bodies and slowly came alive to wash, dress, and catch the shuttle truck that would take us to breakfast. Conversation on the truck centered on speculation as to what the target of the day would be. We hoped for an easy mission and would, if necessary, grudgingly accept a mission to Berlin. The fearlessness of youth is truly a wonderful thing. On this fateful day, I was 20 years old, a commissioned officer and navigator in the United States Air Force. I was not worried about my future. I could accept the trials and danger without flinching and without true fear. In retrospect, I know that today, to be called upon to perform the same acts for the same purpose, I would be reduced to a state of fluid fear and total incompetence. In my personal experience file, I had already been exposed to the baptism of battle and completed 12 combat missions. Breakfast before a mission was truly an experience. Our fare comprised fresh eggs with bacon, cereal, pancakes, juice, and good strong coffee. On non-mission days, our fare would not be quite as elegant, you can be sure. After our repast, all crews reported to the briefing room for details of the mission. This mission found our crew acting as a flying spare. We were to prepare fully, take off with the group, join the formation, and wait for an opening to occur due to an abort by any of the planes scheduled to fly that day. The abort could be due to any mechanical failure that could happen to an aircraft, it would be in the judgment of the crew, make it dangerous to try to complete the mission. Our instructions were to fly with the group of 36 aircraft until we crossed into enemy territory and return to base if we could not find an opening. The crew of a spare would search the formation over and over, looking for that opening. They had been awakened, briefed, spent the gray dawn hours circling with their group as the group assembled into formation, and had completed all the necessary operations that comprise a mission, yet would receive no credit for the mission unless they could actually complete the assignment. Every man on the crew was disheartened as the group formation approached the enemy coastline, and we could find no acceptable niche to allow us to continue flying the mission. As we turned for home, we decided to scan the division line to see if whether one of our sister groups could use a spare. The first squadron was full, the second squadron was equally full, but the third squadron had a vacancy, which we filled. To this point, the mission had been routine and uneventful. We crossed into enemy territory with a moderate amount of flak. We flew over the Netherlands, encountering heavy flak south of Rotterdam and losing one B-17. We again received a heavy dose of flak as we crossed the Rhine. Crossing the Rhine was always dangerous, as the Germans had equipped themselves with flak barges, which they moved up and down the river as they expected various attacks. Our intelligence could not inform us of the flak locations, as they could be moved into position during the night and hidden by mid-afternoon. After crossing the river, we ran into a heavy cloud cover which obscured the ground from us. We were flying at an altitude of 25,400 feet, and the clouds were at about 6,500 feet. At this point in our mission, my work became infinitely more difficult. I could no longer see the ground, and I had to rely on other methods of navigation to keep track of our formation's position. My anxiety increased because I knew that our target had to be bombed visually because of a prisoner of war compound located nearby. This meant that we would have to make a run on the target, go through the flak and the fighters that may protect it, and if we could not see exactly what we were aiming at, we would have to close our bomb bay doors and make a run on an alternate target. The one thing that always gave me pride in the Air Force was the bomb run of the initial point to the target. All missions had an initial point, usually 20 to 25 miles away from the target. This point was more or less a rendezvous point. All groups would reach this point, open their bomb bay doors, and then make a run to the target. From this initial point, the formation would have one objective. It mattered not what kind of defense the enemy could muster. The heaviest flak or the largest squadron of fighters would not deter the attacking force. The bombers are in their most vulnerable position for up to 8 minutes, flying a straight line to the target. As navigator, I had little work to do. While we were flying to the target from the initial point, during this period, I often found myself with a prayer on my lips. At the age of 20, I had not yet truly felt the presence of God. Yet in times of stress, I turned to the only source that could help me. As I prayed my way to the target this day, I could see the hundreds of black flak puffs ahead, and I could see our airplanes falling out of the sky. Clouds were broken over the target, and we might be able to bomb. The group up ahead could see the target and did manage to release their bombs. When we approached the target a minute or so later, it was completely obscured, and we turned off without release. As we turned, our B-17 got a terrific burst of flak, and we suffered a failure in the airplane's electrical system. All apparatus and instruments were out of action. My electric compass was gone, my altimeter was hit by a direct piece of flak that missed me by inches. Our formation made a complete turn back to the initial point, and we were going to again attempt to hit the target. As we returned to go into the area again, I could see that all the other groups had completed their run or had gone to the alternate target. Our formation was the last to attempt to bomb. The anti-aircraft fire was deadly accurate, and they now knew our bombing altitude. We found our way through the flak, found the target open, and all bombs were away. Turning left after the bomb run, our plane took a terrible beating from enemy fire, and we lost the oil lines on 2 of our engines. This meant we would feather the prop, drop out of formation, and try to limp along home as best we could. In a matter of minutes, we were all alone, deep in enemy territory, trying desperately to find safety. I set course north of the Ruhr Valley, hoping that we could change course south as we passed over the Rhine River. Our altitude was dropping about 100 feet a minute, and this was naturally bringing us closer to danger, as anti-aircraft fire becomes more deadly as you fly lower. Being alone in the enemy sky when your plane is mortally wounded is a fearful experience. You are prey to all the cunning of the enemy with minimum chance of reprisal. Our only hope lay in time. If we could keep aloft long enough, we could possibly make it to the liberated areas of Belgium. The order was given to lighten the plane. We would jettison everything that was removable. First the ball turret, then the flak suits, machine guns, ammunition, and any other possible item that could be removed.
We were approaching the Rhine River at an altitude of 16,000 feet over broken clouds, hoping that a flak barge would not be near us. We still could not see the ground, and without any important working instruments, navigation was an educated guess, with more guess than education. We crossed the Rhine over a hailstorm of flak. Another engine was disabled, and this time we could not feather the propeller. The engine was out of action, yet the prop kept being turned by the slipstream. Eventually it would rattle or wing off or burst into flame. We had personnel casualties during the last flak burst also. The ball gunner was seriously wounded in the leg, and I myself do not remember the actual injury, found that my maps were full of blood from the flak across my hands. We knew now that we would have to jump, and we hoped and prayed that the plane would hold together until we reached our own lines. The pilot called me on the intercom and asked for the ETA to our lines. We had about 12 minutes to go. Everything was in readiness for our exit from the plane. The ball gunner had been in such pain that the co-pilot administered morphine. We did not know whether he would be able to open his own parachute, so we attached his chute to a static line to make it open automatically, and we arranged to have 2 crew members jump with him so as to give any needed aid upon reaching the ground. By this time, the plane was vibrating badly due to a windmilling prop, and with only one engine running, we were losing altitude rapidly. The pilot gave the bailout warning. It was only 2 minutes to friendly territory by my figures. I suggested to the pilots that they should unfeather the engines that were damaged and let them run until they would either seize up or burst into flame. I reminded them that I was Jewish, and every foot extra would help save my life. I gave a last silent prayer that we would make it. An engine burst into flame. The bailout bell rang, and we were in action. They threw out the injured ball gunner, jumped with him, and as fast as anyone came to the door, the co-pilot, taking no chances with a freeze-up, gently applied the toe of his foot to the backside of the next jumper. My turn came next. I stepped in front of the door, looked down at the nothingness, and was kicked out of the plane. Although I had never jumped before, I knew all the rules. Slowly count to 10, and then pull the ripcord. I slowly counted to 10, pulled the cord, and waited. I waited, and waited, and waited. Still, my chute did not open. I thought there was something with my chute. I waited more, and just decided to rip it open, when with a terrible jerk, it opened. I looked up as I heard a resounding roar. The plane was immediately above me, flames leaping from the left wing. My counting, my endless waiting, had only taken a fraction of time. The plane roared off into the afternoon sky, leaving me in the vast emptiness. Here I was, about 11,000 feet above God knows where. I could not see the ground because of the clouds. Save that you can hear a slight whistling of wind through your chute, you can hear no other sound. The absolute stillness is shattering. The feeling of detachment from the earth is complete. After the first few moments of my descent, I started to look around. Over to the north, about 200 yards away, I could see another crew member slightly below me. He was wriggling around in his parachute harness. I ventured to shout to him, "What are you trying to do?" He shouted back, "We may land in enemy territory, and I want to smoke one last cigarette." After falling about 4.5 minutes, I found myself enveloped in a cloud bank. I reached out to grab a handful, but the nature of cloud has no substance. It's like grabbing a handful of fog. After clearing the clouds, I could see the countryside stretching out below me. I started to experiment with my chute, collapsing it, pulling on the guidelines to see if I could change direction. This is my experience with a parachute, and I had to learn its management as quickly as possible. Suddenly, the ground started to rush up rapidly. I looked to see where I would land if I kept drifting in the same direction. It looked as if I would just miss a barn and land in the farmyard next to it. I noticed a fence about 10 feet from the barn, and on the open side of the farmyard, I could see what was either a bull or a cow. My decision would have to be made quickly. Should I land on the side with the animal, or should I try to land between the barn and the fence? I spied the udder, and I joined my friend, the cow. Immediately upon landing, I was surrounded by Belgian freedom fighters brandishing submachine guns. From my clothing, they could not tell if I was friend or foe, and they were not taking any chances. My high school French came to the rescue. I shouted, "Je suis un aviateur américain." I had landed very hard in the jump and apparently injured my leg. Seeing that I was bleeding and could not walk, and that the enemy was still about, I was whisked away to a farmhouse, fed, and put to bed. As night fell, they took me to a local hospital. I found 3 of my crew members at that hospital. The ball gunner, who had been seriously injured in the last flak burst, unfortunately had his leg amputated below the knee, and we all had various injuries. When the townspeople found out that there were injured American soldiers in their hospital, they all wanted to come in and thank the Americans for liberating them. They lined up outside the hospital gate and slowly came in and thanked us. Some brought souvenirs that I still have. After a day or two, I became ambulatory, and seeing that no ambulances came to remove us, one of the gunners and I borrowed car fare money from the nuns, and in our flying suits we boarded a local streetcar to Charleroi, found an American charge d'affaires, and arranged to be evacuated to a MASH unit. After being confined to various hospitals on the continent and in England, I eventually returned to my own base. Now I can tell you why I call this particular mission the Lucky 13. Although I went through a harrowing experience, I was forced to miss the next mission that I was scheduled to fly. The next mission was a very easy penetration of the French coast. Only one burst of flak was encountered. That burst of flak killed the navigator who took my place that day. Pretty incredible. So
That story was, of course, written in England and rewritten, and as far as I know, everything in it is true, as my memory says it's true. Well, that was the mission that really set me up, because when I got back to England, I was, first of all, there are two different kinds of navigators. One navigator is a lead navigator who sets the course and brings you to the target. The other navigator is a follow navigator. He is only there to make sure he knows where you are going in case you are shot away from the formation, to be able to bring you back home. So in my first missions, I was, of course, a follow navigator. I was not a lead, and I just had to follow along to know where I was in case of emergency. Of course, I had that emergency 12 times in a row, and now 13. But in the meantime, when I finally got back to my base, they primed me to become a lead navigator, because I was an experienced navigator at that time. And the benefit of being a lead navigator, although it's more dangerous because you're in the first plane, the benefit of being that is the fact that for every 2 lead missions you do, they will take 1 mission off of your total requirement. So I did 8 lead missions. Instead of doing 35 missions, I only did 31, because 8 missions gave me the credit for the 4 missions that I missed. I'd like to tell you about another mission, and this is the Winning the War mission. And I also wrote this one, but this I'll read this one myself. Let me see here. Okay. See, I have all these papers. I can go on for hours. When my children were younger, I told them how my crew won the war. Of course, they didn't believe me, but I didn't care. I just told them about how I won the war. And we had a lot of fun about it. But they really did not believe me. They're here now, and I'll tell you, they didn't believe me. One day I received a call from my World War II pilot. He was in Boston on a business trip, and I hadn't seen him in many years. So I went and picked him up, and I brought him home. When we arrived home, we were all sitting in the living room waiting for him. The first thing out of his mouth was, "Do you remember the day we won the war?" This established the fact that I was telling the truth the whole time, and we really won the war. And I'll tell you the story of how we won the war. This particular mission was a maximum effort. We had over 1,000 aircraft heading for a town near Munich. We had come on, pages. We had an early morning takeoff, circling around to form a division line, and then headed for the continent. The weather was soupy, but they thought it was clear enough to be able to find our target and drop our bombs. We crossed the channel into Holland, immediately ran into a lot of flak from the anti-aircraft guns. It was overcast. We couldn't see the ground, but they had radar gun control. And although we were climbing to altitude, their 88 millimeter guns could locate us. As we crossed from Holland into Germany, navigation was difficult, and only because we had a radar navigation system could we determine our course. As we were the lead ship, we had 2 navigators aboard. I was the dead reckoning navigator and did all the plotting and setting of the course. We also had a bombardier who would report ground sightings to me so I could plot them on our map. Our final navigator was a radar navigator. He was called a Mickey navigator, and he had a rudimentary form of radar that helped us locate positions on the ground. I think it was called Mickey after Mickey Mouse, because it didn't work all the time. We really couldn't depend on it for anything, and it was always going out of commission. This particular mission was a difficult mission. We were flying at 25,000 feet, gaining altitude as we flew into Germany. We could not see the ground, yet headquarters told us that the target was visible, and we should be able to bomb it. We were running into flak from time to time. We could not see the ground, and were hoping that the weather would break, and we could finish this mission. Now, I've said we could not see the ground 3 or 4 times already. We could not see the ground. This was important to us because, we had no other way of really making sure we were going to the target unless we could see where we were going. Munich was deep into Germany. We were 2/3 of the way in when headquarters informed us that the target was socked in and we could not bomb it unless it was visual. We were then assigned a secondary target, and we proceeded to change course to the secondary target. The secondary target was a target we could bomb using the Mickey bombing system. That's the radar bombing system. However, as we set up the radar system, just about the time we're getting ready to set it up at the initial point, the Mickey system failed as it usually did. It went out of commission, and the Mickey operator could not get it to work. So there we were in Germany, 108 B-17s, 3,000 pounds of bombs, and nowhere to put them. We could not bring them back to England because you cannot land with a bomb load. We would have had to find a target of opportunity, or failing that, we would have to dump them into the channel. And after a short conference with the navigators, we decided that we would look for a target of opportunity on the way home. Of course, I set course west and started looking for any available target that we could bomb. It was still overcast, or actually undercast, and we could not see much of anything. As we kept on flying towards England, we kept our eyes open, looking for any opening in the undercast. Suddenly, the bombardier noticed that there was a breakup in the undercast ahead, and perhaps we could lead our formation through it, underneath it. The group commander decided to send a plane as a scout to see if going down through the clouds was feasible. After a few minutes, he reported back that we could take all of our planes right through the formation and be on the underside of the clouds. But we would lose some altitude in doing this. We then proceeded to take the entire wing, three groups of aircraft, which is 36 B-17s in each group, down under the cloud cover. Of course, this jeopardized our position as we would be at an altitude of about 12,000 feet. Off in the distance, underneath the overcast, we noticed smoke coming from a rather large factory. This was our target of opportunity. We found the factory that has smoke. It must be making something for the war effort. The bombardier set up his bomb sight. From an initial point, we opened our bomb bay doors and proceeded to demolish this factory. Now, we were, as I said, three groups of 36 B-17s, 108 B-17s, with thousands of pounds of bombs on this one little factory. Of course, we didn't know what this factory manufactured or how it contributed to the German war effort. We knew that the bombs were away. That was the important thing for us. Immediately after bombs were away, the camera plane leaves the formation and heads at high speed to our base. We encountered some flak on the way home, but nothing of much significance. When we arrived back at the base, the photo of our strike was already processed, and our intelligence unit had identified the factory. The factory was a shoe manufacturer, and they made shoes and boots for the entire German army. And if you happen to be able to view a newsreel of World War II, you'll find from that day forward, the German army ran out of shoes and boots and were at a distinct disadvantage as winter was approaching. That's the story of how our crew won the war.
So Al, how did your time over Germany finish up? I know as we're getting towards January and the final missions, were there anything eventful in your final missions, or did they tend to kind of just wind down without much incident?
There are a couple missions that are in my memory. One mission I remember, we were bombing a target, and we had bombed it the day previously and didn't, it was, I think it was the IG Farben plant in Ludwigshafen, which was a chemical plant, which was about 1.5 miles or 2 miles long, one long building. And we went out on one day and tried to bomb it, and bombed one portion of it. And they sent us out the next day to bomb the same target. And as it happened, I was there at the first mission, and we did bomb it. And the second mission that we went out, we for some reason we came over the target and we couldn't drop our bombs. And the commander decided that we would make another pass at it, and he decided to circle around and come back around and go back to the initial point and come back at the target again. And while he was doing that, he didn't realize that we were going to pass over a very large city. And if you pass over a large city, you're going to be murdered because they have all these guns. And I was the navigator, and I called up to the pilot. I said, "Navigator to pilot, we have to change course." And he said, "I'm busy, leave me alone." Because he was really upset because of the fact that he missed the target the first time around, and he was trying to save his reputation by getting the target finally. And I let about another minute go by, and I called him again, and I said, "Navigator to pilot, I have to talk to you." He said, "If you bother me again, I'll have you court-martialed." Well, here I was. We were going to lose planes, we were going to lose men, and I had to do something about this. So I switched my intercom to my co-pilot, to my pilot, who was his co-pilot at the time. And I told my co-pilot that we were going to go right over a city, and we have to really divert immediately. So my pilot, who I had flown missions with him, knew that I'm the guy who would be doing this, would be telling him the truth. He took it, he put his hand over like this, and he turned the wheel and brought the whole formation short of this other city, which really saved our group. And we did go around, we did bomb the target, and we did get home. And when we got home, this guy never said a word to me, the colonel, never said a word to me, never said thank you, never said anything, just walked away.
So what happened when you actually finished your tour of duty?
Well, what do you mean by when I finished my tour?
As in, when you finished your 31 missions
Well,
in January, what happened? Where did you go?
I finished my 31 missions. I came back to the States, of course, and I flew back they had a particular title for us. Happy Warrior. I flew back as a happy warrior. And I landed in Washington, D.C., and they arranged for me to come home and have a furlough. And from that point, I went to a replacement school and became a navigation instructor. And as it turned out, they needed an engineering instructor at Randolph Field in Texas. And because I had an engineering mind, they said, "Could you think you could teach engineering?" And I said, "Of course." So I read the book in the morning and taught the course in the afternoon.
So you have some really interesting, I guess, show and tell items here.
Yeah, I have a lot of things here that I've saved over the years. One of the biggest things that you'll be able to see this later on, the crew escape kit, the kit they give you, it was put together by the English for the English crews. And I have to talk about the English for a minute. You know, in the beginning of the war, they tried to do daylight bombing, and they couldn't do daylight bombing because of the fact that their airplanes, most of their planes, their big bombers, were made the way the World War I planes were made. They were made of basswood and fabric, and doped up fabric, and they were not metal like our planes were. So therefore, when not all the bombers, but some of the bombers were this way, and because of this, they couldn't do daylight bombing. They lost everything when they tried it. And we came along and we volunteered to do daylight bombing, which is much more difficult than doing night bombing, because they can see you in the daylight. They know you're there, especially when you get to be 30,000 feet and they have condensation trails. It's like a big arrow in the sky pointing to where you are. So, but anyway, we did do the daylight bombing, and we lost a lot of men. And I've got our figures for how many men we lost. Just for a second, hold on a minute, and I'll give you some of the figures. We lost, 24,000 airmen died in the 8th Air Force, and we had 26,000 were POWs. That's 50,000 people we lost alone, and 10,000 more like me who were wounded and returned to base. And So the Marines in World War II lost 19,000 people. We lost more than the Marines. And the Marines, of course, were first line battle. We were sent out on missions, as I said, missions that you couldn't even complete. And missions, we were cannon fodder, really cannon fodder. And as I say, if you want to see what we were about, try to get the movie. You can get it off of Netflix if you want to. 12 O'Clock High, the original movie. It's really great.
So, yeah, so some of this stuff is really interesting. So take us through what some of this is in the escape kit.
I have the escape kit. The escape kit comes with a whole series of silk maps. These are silk maps of the whole continent. And you open them up, and there's a complete map. Wherever you are, you're gonna find yourself on this map. This one here happens to be a map of France and Spain. See, at the corner. And I have one of Germany and one of the rest of France. And then we had a little language book. So you had to be able to communicate a little bit with the people that you're capturing you. In addition to that, we had little passport pictures in case they needed to make a passport for you, a fake passport, that you already had the pictures for you to paste in. So, and then a little teeny compass to help you evacuate, to find your way. See, there you go. And then money, we have money. Give me some money.
Sure. Yours.
I'll tell you, this is not real money. I made it myself. But I want you to know I spent the money that was in the kit.
So one of the things I thought was one of the coolest things is actually your computer.
Now, you all know what a computer is. You plug it in, you have electricity, and it's fine. This is the real computer. This is it. It says right on it, computer. And if you don't believe me, it says aerial directing computer. This is a computer of 1940.
So what exactly did you use that
Well,
for?
this determines your airspeed. You can determine your airspeed. You see, the higher you go, your airspeed changes. It doesn't matter what it says on your instrument panel. Your instrument panel may be 150, because, but if your air is thinner at 150, you're really doing 275. So this calculates all those things for you. It calculates you can calculate your course on it, and it's the most important device that you could possibly have. This is a navigational computer. Here we have a navigational plotter that you plot. You put this onto your map so you know where you're going. It's like a compass rose and what else do we have?
Well, here we actually, this is great because everyone's going to wear aviator sunglasses all the time. These are actual aviator sunglasses. And he probably looks very cool wearing them.
Well, they're a little gone, but you know, they're 70 years old.
Yeah, you still look kind of like you're in Top Gun. It's good. But I think the coolest thing of all of this is actually the pilot chute right here.
My pilot chute.
Yeah.
This is the,
So
I don't know if you know how a chute works, but I had a chest chute on. You snap it on. You don't. You have to be mobile in the plane, so you don't have a chute on, but you have the harness on, and the harness has two round, big clips on it, and you snap your chute on when you need it. And this is wrapped up in the front of it, and when you pull the ripcord, this falls down, and this falls down, and that pops out. And when it pops out, the wind grabs it and pulls the rest of the chute out. The only thing I could save of the original chute was this. This is the original chute that saved my life. And it was manufactured on March 10th, 1944.
So for everything you did, oh, there we go. Let's make sure it doesn't get caught up. Obviously, the government was very thankful, and here we have an air medal with 4 oak leaf clusters awarded to Alfred Benjamin. Can you tell us what exactly this was awarded for?
Well, I want you to know, I'm not a hero, I'm just a survivor. And as a survivor, every five missions you go, and you succeed in making 5 missions, they give you an air medal. So I have 5 air medals, and it's worth something. And then I have the Purple Heart because I was injured. And of course I have the Victory Medal, and I have that. And I have also 4 battle stars. So in all I have 10 decorations. And that's a lot of decorations, but as I say, I'm not a hero, I'm just a survivor.
Well, the French might actually disagree with that, since they awarded you the Legion of Honor a few years ago, which I think is pretty amazing.
I'm a knight of the French Order, so from now on, you can call me Sir Alfred.
So why did they award that to you? That was only a few years ago, right?
Idea.
Oh. Well, clearly they seem to like the things you did.
I
But
have a few other things here. I have a ration book from World War II with a couple of ration coupons on it. And I have another little thing, my gasoline ration card. Before I was in service, it's an A card. They used to give me 3 gallons a week. So that was a lot of gas. And there was one more thing I had over here. This is my mother's ID. She was an aircraft spotter, and she was allowed to go on top of buildings in Boston with binoculars looking for aircraft. This is her pass.
Did she ever see one?
Huh?
Did she ever see one?
No, she never saw one.
so we'd love for you guys to come up afterwards and take a look at all this stuff, because it really is fascinating. But for now, we'd love to open up for some question and answer to the crowd. And so if you guys give me 1 second, I'll just kind of point to people and direct your question to Al. Please, sir, yes.
Which was more dangerous when you were on a mission, flak or enemy aircraft?
Well, in my particular mission was flak, because by the time I got there, the Germans were busy with the Eastern Front, and a lot of the planes were at the Eastern Front, so they weren't attacking us as much. And flak was my main thing. As a matter of fact, I only had one time to use my guns on an enemy aircraft in all 31 missions. So, but let me tell you, there are other missions where we were flying along, and the group ahead of us, you could see airplanes falling out of the sky because they were being hit by fighters, and maybe the one behind us could be hit. We were lucky. We were if you flew good formation, good tight formation, they would not go near you, because each plane had 11 or 12 guns that could fire at an attacking group. And if all the groups were tight, that's hundreds of guns. This thing is falling apart. Hundreds of guns that were aimed at somebody trying to attack. So that was it.
What was the name of your base?
Grafton Underwood. It was 384th Bomb Group in Grafton Underwood.
In Grantham.
Grafton Underwood.
Sir, in the back right there.
Sorry. First, I'd like to applaud you for your service. I think you have a tremendous history, and it's that important for everyone to listen to what you have to say. The only thing I feel is that I don't know if you go into a situation where you go to the schools and tell them the stories that you tell us. I think that is vital. I think that is important.
Well, the reason I came is because I feel the same as you. What is happening is the fact that the people are forgetting what happened completely about the war and what people went through to save the United States and the world, actually. And we did. We saved the world, because if it wasn't for us, we would have been conquered.
I am a retired Marine. I spent time in the Marine Corps. And
I can see by your hat.
I'm sorry?
I can see by your hat.
It's just a little part of what I'm wearing. Thank you for that. I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
How many people are in the B-17? How many people are with you?
Well, I'll give you a line of how it works. There's a pilot, a co-pilot, a bombardier, and a navigator. That's 4. These are officers.
Okay.
We have a top turret gunner, we have a ball gunner, a radio man,
Okay.
a waist gunner, another waist gunner, and a tail gunner.
So now that's
A tail gunner.
12.
No, it's 10. It works out to 10. Okay.
Okay.
Now, in some missions, we dropped the bombardier. And instead of having a bombardier, we had what we call a toggleier. And all he did was, when the bomb from the lead ship dropped their bombs, he'd push the button and the bombs would drop out with them. And he was just a gunner then, but acting as a toggleier.
Right.
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But having a Togolea sometimes was difficult, because if you had a hang up in the bomb bay with a plane with a bomb not falling out, he wasn't equipped to know how to get rid of it. So that was a tough thing, because I had to do that myself. I had to get rid of a bomb that was hung up in the bomb bay when we had a Togolea in the first missions.
Right. During that time, I'm not sure whether it was the 5th Air Corps or the 8th that was going to bomb a monastery in Italy. They were told not to.
Yeah, that was the 15th Air Force. 15th. 15th, yeah.
Is that Monte Cassino?
That's Monte
Is that the-
Cassino, Monte Cassino, yeah.
And they were told not to bomb.
Yeah.
Eventually, they changed their mind because the casualties that we were taking were huge.
Yeah, yeah.
Tens of thousands of people were being slaughtered,
Yeah.
where the Germans were up there firing down. Finally, they decided to bomb it, which they did,
Yeah,
and destroy it.
yeah.
And why didn't they do that initially?
Why didn't they bomb the ovens?
You tell me, that's a good
I don't
question.
know.
My next question.
I don't know. I could have bombed them. Tell me where they were. I could have let them live.
Because your orders were not to.
No, we didn't. First of all, we didn't know about it at the time. Really, we didn't know.
Really?
No, no. The only thing I knew is if I would be taken prisoner, I'd be dead. That's the only thing. But I have my dog tag here somewhere, and it's got an H on it. I never would go without it. I was proud to be what I am,
Yes.
and I'm still proud to be what I am.
I thank you for your service,
Yeah.
by the way, and I think what you bring to everybody here is an amazing thing. People who are here now have served, but I think it's important, like I said initially, to go on and speak to the younger people, because it's important for them
Yeah.
to know what happened at that particular time.
You know that we're losing 9,000 veterans a day, 9,000 a day. So we're all 90 years old or older, it's tough.
Well, you're doing damn good.
So you had a question in the front here?
Yes, sir. Thank you for everything that you, sir, of course, the gentleman reiterated here today. I have 4 generations in my family that protected our country here, and want to thank you. Also, too, is I have just a couple questions. First one is, what's the difference between a B-17 and a B-52? Is it bigger?
B-52 is much bigger than B-17.
And
And B-52 has all the modern things that we never had. Remember, it was years between the development of the B-17. The B-17 was developed in 1934.
Okay.
And the B-24, which is the other bomber that bombed with us, was developed in 1940. And the difference between 34 and 40 was amazing. It was an amazing difference. See, and then the B-17s, they developed the Sperry gyroscope, Sperry turrets for the B-24, and they borrowed them for the B-17. We didn't have that type of turret in the beginning. The B-17 F did not have the same type of machinery that the B-17G had, because they added all the time as they went. And the B-29 they didn't touch the guns. They were remote controlled guns. It was entirely different. You didn't have to hold on to the gun. You held on to a sight. That's all you held on to. It was all remote.
And my last question would be, is just, you talked about all the missions that you were in by Germany. I had the privilege of going to Kurland, not Berlin. And I don't know if you had actually bombed that particular area, because that particular area was, and still stands, a beautiful church that's very low, but it has very, the height of the church is not high, but it has pointy steeples in this particular place, and it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
But it was the only things that the Americans left.
Well,
So
I
that
don't-
way they wouldn't forget.
I don't know if we ever left it intentionally. I'll tell you.
I'll be honest, that's what the Germans stole.
I'll tell you how a bombing went. Remember, we were 36 aircraft, and 36 aircraft were tied in one here, one here, one here. And then there's another 3 stacked up the same way. and another 3 stacked up the same way, and the tail group is stacked up the same way. We're almost a mile wide. And when the lead plane drops the bombs, everybody drops. Now, the bombs are not gonna hit the one target, they're gonna hit the spreaded area on the ground. So if we were aiming for a particular factory, it's not gonna only hit the factory, it's gonna hit everything. So we didn't intentionally miss the church. God missed the church.
Great, thank you. Run back there, yes.
Yeah, so you said the normal crew is 10.
Yeah.
But in your picture, you have 11 crew.
Well, I think we have 12.
12.
12, yeah. That's a lead crew. A lead crew has a little bit different configuration. We have the gunners the same as the others, but navigators, we have more navigators. We have a radar navigator, this Mickey navigator I was talking about, and then we have the direct DR navigator. That was me. I was the one who took all of the information from the other 2. In other words, we had one navigator looking at the ground, with comparing it to his map all the time. So he would say, we just passed over such and such a point, and I would say, what's the coordinates of that point? And I would put the coordinates down on my map, and the radar navigator would say, the city is 35 miles away from our plane. I said, what city is it? He says, Brunswick, and I would look at my map, and I would draw a line 35 miles away from Brunswick, and with the information I had that we were going over here, and I got the information from this guy saying we're here, and the other information here, I knew exactly where we were all the time. Now, that's the lead navigator, because it's important for the lead to get to the target. It's not important for the follow navigators to get to the target, because they're only there to get you home. The lead is to get you to the target. So we had a lead, and we had a deputy lead, and the lead and the deputy lead both had 3 navigators in it.
Yes, sir.
Was the Norton bomb site as accurate as they claim?
Well, the Norton bomb site was a mechanical computer, and it would direct your wind direction. First, you put a line in on your target, and as you drifted off, you'd keep correcting the line to make sure it was on your target. And then it had a speed line, and you would hook the speed line on, so that was on the target. And as your plane approached, there was another line behind it. As the 2 lines coincided and the other line was on top, it would automatically drop your bombs. Automatically. There was no such thing as the bombardier pushing the button to drop bombs. The bombs fell out of the plane when all the lines coincided. In addition to that, the bombardier controlled the aircraft with his bomb sight. The moment you hit the initial point, the pilot turned the plane over to the bombardier. And the bombardier, by moving the bomb sight, the plane would move. And when one plane moved, they all moved. And okay, now the accuracy. You want to know about the accuracy. Between 35,000 feet and the ground, there could be 7 different wind shifts. So, first of all, the bombs are going to go this way when the wind is pushing them, and this way, you're hoping for an average. That's all you're hoping for. So it was the best bomb sight available, but it wasn't like an intelligent bomb today that knows what's going to hit. No matter which way it goes, it's going to correct itself.
Yes.
Did you lose any close friends?
What?
Did you lose any close friends?
Well, yeah, sure. I told you about the navigator who took my place. He was a guy from Boston that I knew. He was a friend of mine. And he took my place when the day I didn't come back. And he was killed. One burst, he was killed. His name was Silverman.
One thing that actually makes me curious about is, did you stay in touch with a lot of the guys from your crew after the war and long after?
Not really. The only one I ever saw afterwards, I saw my pilot because he came to Boston, as I said, and the kid who wanted to have a smoke on the way down, his niece contacted me after he died and wanted to know, do I know anything about his history because I had written in the 384th, we have like a group thing in the internet. On the internet, I've written that I was in the 384th, and she saw that she was in the 384th, and she wrote to me and asked me could I give any his history, because he didn't talk about the war. And I gave her the history of him and how he did this particular thing. And she wrote back to me and said he died from lung cancer from smoking. Well, he smoked all his life, so.
Ma'am.
May I ask, with all your gifts, what did you do with the rest of your life after the war?
Well, eventually, I married that lovely lady, and I had 3 guys. There's one over there, there's one over there. And we had our own business. We did audiovisual presentations.
Yes.
Al, when you bombed Putumayo, did you come in contact with the ME-262 jet fighter?
I only came in contact with ME-262 one time. One time he came through our formation, didn't fire on us, just flew through the formation, right straight. And that was it. We couldn't lay a gun on him, and he didn't fire on us. It was the only time I ever saw one.
I think that gentleman made a very good point about the generations. You were from the greatest generation. The public needs to hear more, about this history.
I'm doing my best.
Unfortunately, like you just said, there's not that many left that want to do this, so I commend you for bringing this out to the public.
Well, you see, I'm one of the lucky ones because I was so young at the time. I mean, I did all this work. I was home. I have to tell you this. I came home and I had a friend who was a 4F and didn't go into service. And he said, let's go out and have a drink. And I said, sure. So we went down to a local bar and they wouldn't serve me. I was only 20 years old. I was back from all these missions and they wouldn't serve me.
Yes, sir.
We hear an awful lot about post-traumatic syndrome. Did you feel anything like that after the war?
Never, not me. I mean, it's probably a personality thing because I never felt anything. I'm sorry that all these people got killed, but I hope that I wouldn't be on the ground to see people die, and I didn't really see people die, and I never saw a combatant. I never fired anybody that I know of. I never killed anybody that I know of. So I have an entirely different thing. It's entirely different. If I was fighting on the ground and shooting at people, perhaps I would have terrible recriminations. But I didn't see my enemy at all. I hated him, but I didn't see him.
Yes, sir.
Talk a little bit about your daily routine on the days you didn't fly, and also how often did you fly?
Well, I got there in the beginning of July, and I think I left the 25th of January. So I was there approximately, I know exactly how long, 7 months and 17 days. The time I left the States to the time I got back was 7 months and 17 days. I got paid for all those days. What's the rest of your question?
How often did you fly?
How often? Well, I did 31 missions during that period. So, and for 30 days, I was in hospitals from the time I was shot down in Belgium till the time I got back to action was over 30 days. So you could take that out. However, the other guys in my crew, I was the first who completed my crew work. In other words, I was the first one. They had to do 35 missions. My gunners had to do 35 missions because they weren't lead gunners. They didn't get credit for that. And I got the 4 missions knocked off. So I left first. So I don't know if that helps you with your information.
He also brought up a great point, which is wondering what you did on the days you didn't fly. I mean, would you guys play baseball? What did you do?
No, well, the days you didn't fly, first of all, you could sleep in the morning, which is something you couldn't ordinarily do. And I had to do, a couple times I had to send some letters from all the crew that they made you do that. And in the afternoon, I used to play bridge. They taught me how to play bridge. I played Culberson, if you remember Culberson, and I played with the flight surgeon and one of the commanders and myself and another guy played bridge because nobody else wanted to play bridge, I guess. I don't know. And Lorraine says I didn't learn much.
Were you able to go into London or any of the cities nearby?
Oh, I went to London, yes, and I went to London after every third mission. You got 2 days off. You could go to London, and we took the train to London when we went. I have a picture somewhere of me sitting in a hotel in London with 2 of my crew members. So.
Yes, sir. Again.
I have an old friend who was also a navigator, and he was with the 15th Air Corps. He did 24 and a half missions. He was shot down and was held prisoner at the Stalag, one of the places that
German Stalag.
And he was spent about a year there. He was credited with 24 missions because the mission only counts when you do your run.
And you get back.
And you're back. So
you're back.
he had 24 and a half. And he was one heck of a good friend.
Yeah.
And I asked him if he ever had any incidents that were quite interesting. You are very, very much like he was.
Well, we probably went through the same things, you know.
His name, it's a small word. Stan. First name was Stanley. Seibel.
No.
No. He was held prisoner, freed.
Well, see, I was in the 8th Air Force. He was in the 15th. There's a big difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Had you ever had the Red Tails as protecting your group, your bombing mission?
I'm not familiar with it at all. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else want to ask anything?
More questions? Ron, yes?
Yeah, you talked about the Mickey radar system. Was that on your missions from the beginning, or was it introduced?
No. That came in about, I would say the 15th mission, my 15th mission, they came in with Mickey. And they took navigators and they made them Mickey navigators. And they watched the plot on it was next to the ball gun. They put this great big round thing, and it was a regular radar installation, and he had a scope, and on the scope he could see the ground, and from the formation of the ground, then comparing that with a map, he could tell where we were. See, he didn't have much, it wasn't much of a navigation, much of an aid. He could see the ground, he could see cities, but he couldn't identify much. And if he compared that to a map that he actually had, he could find out where we were. And that's how we worked.
Do you know who made the Mickey? What company made it?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
And younger Benjamin Ross here.
Many of us, I'm sure, have flown, but you haven't given your sense of what it was like to be in a B-17, the fact that it wasn't pressurized, what the weather was like, what was it like to get into that plane and be flying in that plane? We all have nice cushy seats with 31-inch pitch.
Well, first of all, the skin of the plane is 32 thousandths of an inch. That's what it is. It's 32 thousandths of an inch of aluminum. And if you take a pencil and you push it hard enough, you could push it through. It's that thin. And secondly, it's 65 degrees at 30,000 feet. It's minus 65 degrees. So it's cold. And if you touch anything without gloves, you're going to freeze to it. So I had to wear silk gloves because my hands, I had to keep writing with a pencil on my log. And I had to wear silk gloves, and I had a muff, a heated muff that I kept my hands in. I'd pull them out, I'd make an entry in the log and put them back in again. And we had in the beginning, we had these fur-lined jackets, it's like a winter jacket, but it was fur-lined. And in the end, we had what we called heated suits. They were like an electric blanket plugged into the electric system, of the 24-volt electric system of the plane, and helped a little bit. But it was really cold. And you couldn't, if you were with a gun and had to shoot, it was cold. The thing was wide open, you know. You're not inside a plane. There's a big opening this big, and the gun is in the middle. And you're 35,000 feet or 30,000 feet and freezing. And you were oxygen, from 10,000 feet on, you wore an oxygen mask. And at 24,000 feet, your moisture in your mouth that went around the edges of the mask would freeze, and you had ice all around the thing. But you didn't get, for some reason, you didn't get frozen. You didn't get frostbite. I don't know why, but you didn't. And you had actual ice around the mask.
Yes, sir.
Alfred, I've heard the term the whole 10 yards quite often. And someone has told me that the waist gunner, of which there were two on the 17, had 10 yards of ammo going back and forth. And to have used the whole 10 yards was to have used all your ammo. Did you ever hear that expression?
I never heard that expression, but they did have a belt of ammo. Each one of them had a belt of ammo. In fact, they had the B-17F had both openings opposite each other, and they found out that they would bump into each other as they were trying to shoot. So then they offset the doors. They offset the areas where the guns were mounted. But they did have one belt of ammunition. And I had two guns of my own. One on the right side, a cheek gun, and one on the left side. And I had a belt of ammunition for each one of them. And if I ran out, I ran out. But you were supposed to shoot in bursts. Anyway, you're not supposed to keep shooting. You're shooting in bursts of 2 or 3, 2 or 3, 2 or 3. Because if you shoot too many, you're going to burn out your barrel. It's going to melt. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. On occasion, I've gone over to Westchester County Airport when a B-17 along with a P-51,
Yeah.
and I believe it's a
B-24.
B-24. They arrive and you can board them.
Yeah, you can.
And you can even fly in them if you choose.
Yes, you can.
Have you ever had the opportunity to return to B-17?
Well, I took my wife aboard the same aircraft that you talked about, it's the Collins aircraft, and she said to me, "How did you fit in this thing?"
And how tall are you, by the way?
6'3".
All right, any other questions? Nope, we got one over here.
Do you ever have any particularly interesting experiences with the, shall we say, superior officers or the Army hierarchy or whatever that would be interesting, funny, whatever to tell us?
Well, I was in the Air Corps. And the
Well, that's
Air Corps, we were all the same. We were all kids. Everybody was a kid. Even the commanders were a kid. I mean, the captains, a captain was me, who was a pilot who had 20 missions. He became a captain. See, I was too young. I didn't ever got a captaincy because I was too young. They're not going to make a 20-year-old a captain in my situation. They're not going to do it. So I was a first lieutenant. That was fine. I don't mind.
Yes, right here.
You ever come and meet Robert Morgan, the pilot of the Memphis Belle, which
No.
was in the first 25 missions?
No.
I was able to come back
You know,
home.
The first plane that came home was the Memphis Belle. And that's a nice movie too. I'll tell you, the Memphis Belle, I saw the movie. It was a very good movie. Everything happened in the Memphis Belle. Same things happened to me, only mine took 30 missions. They did it all in one.
Sir, in the front here, you had a question?
You said you wrote those recreations when you were in England.
The only one of them. This is Lucky 13th. I wrote
Did you
that.
actually write that when you were 20 years old?
Yeah.
Because I thought it was amazing.
Yeah,
I am so impressed that you could, at 20 years old, write something like that. It's dramatic.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just think, sir, just the generations, as the gentleman said in the back before, it's just that the way my mother's still alive, she's 87, and she says all the time that boys became men. And also, too, of course, you know, it's been in my generations, in my blood, but just to see that how they were so proud, and yourself, to protect our country. And just that's why the gentleman keeps reiterating, I think, that we take things for granted.
I'll tell you.
And I will never.
I'll tell you a story. I went in. I was like a little Jewish kid. I never wanted to fight. I never wanted to do anything. And in the end, I became a man, just simply from what I did in the army. they taught me things that everybody should be taught. And I ran the obstacle course, and I listened to people, officers that would made me do things I didn't want to do, and all these things made a man of me. And my personal thing is that I would like to see in our country that everybody serve 2 years in some capacity before they go to college and get college free. The government should give you 2 years of service somewhere and get college free. I don't care, and it would be wonderful. We'd all be much better off for it. So.
All right, we'll take one or two more. Actually, the lady way in the back first.
Yes.
They have a fabulous culture that is the airmen, and I was wondering if they were something.
I don't know anything about it.
And you had a question in the middle here, miss?
Yes, well, I'm glad you're here safe.
Thank you.
And we do take for granted what servicemen do. And for you to go in details about how it was cold, it's very uncomfortable. My father is a Korean vet, and he suffered from post-traumatic, and you was blessed because he was on the ground, like you said, it's a different experience. The gentleman here, the ex-Marine or the Marine, he had asked a question about, well, he made a statement about young kids. They should get to hear you because it's more tangible to actually come up in front with somebody who had that experience.
Yeah.
Have you gone to different colleges or?
No, this is the third time I've done this. I've done it 3 times, but you know, it's tough to do too. You have to get the group together, and you have to, you know, it's not easy. So, you know,
One more question.
yeah.
How did you become a bomber instead of being on the ground? Was it chosen for you to be in air than in the ground, or was it just?
I don't understand your question. But
Okay, like you said, you was fortunate you wasn't up close in front.
Yeah, right.
To actually kill somebody,
Yeah.
you didn't see, you know, like some people see
Yeah.
a child or had to bomb somebody,
Right.
an innocent person was there, you didn't get a chance to experience that.
Well, I think you enlisted in the Air Corps, correct?
I enlisted in the Air Corps.
Right, so he chose.
So to become a bomber, you chose to be a navigator?
I had to pass various tests to become one, and to become an officer, I had to have a certain level of education.
Okay.
See, but which I didn't have.
So the person they go in, they take a test and they recognize you.
Well, the first thing, when you get in service, the first thing they do is they give you a general classification test, and that determines what your careers are going to be in service, really. And if you're high enough, you're eligible to be an officer, and if you're low enough, you're eligible to be a soldier. So, you know, it's a whole spread of things that they're going to. Yeah. And if you happen to have some skills, they'll try to use your skills, whatever they may be.
All right, thank you. We're actually hitting on 1:30 here, so I just wanted to really thank Alfred. So everyone for the wonderful presentation. Right, okay. And now I'm going to pass the mic over to my mother here to finish up.
So I'm pleased to announce that George Latimer, our state senator, is in the audience with us this afternoon. George is going to make a special presentation to Alfred.
This is wonderful, Mr. Benjamin, and on behalf of your friends in the state of New York, in celebration of your brave service to our grateful nation, and in appreciation of your talk here at the Portchester Library Public Library, this is Alfred Benjamin Day in the state of New York.
There are snacks in the back, and feel free to come up and speak to Alfred.